We're breaking down the Buffalo Bills' initial 53-man roster today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Wednesday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day. And as a reminder to you, we are free and available for you on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's podcast is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedon. NFL. Well, folks, the Bills did it. They got down to a 53-man roster. The final cuts were made, and we have a football team to examine. Now, it is important right off the bat that the Bills set their initial 53-man roster. This is going to change a lot, probably tomorrow. There are things that are going to happen routinely throughout the course of a season where players might get injured, certain players might become available. And so while this is the guys that made the team, it's far from a set situation. It is fluid. It will remain fluid throughout the course of the season. And I think there's no better way to explain that than telling you that the Bills don't have a punter on their roster, right? The Bills are going to have a punter probably very soon, and there's going to be a corresponding move to create a roster spot for that punter. And we will talk about that here today on the podcast. But with this thing being set and us having a pretty good idea of what this roster is going to look like for week one against the Los Angeles Rams, let's talk about where Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott settled with the cuts and who made the team initially. I know no other way to do this besides going position by position. And I know that we do that a lot in this podcast, but if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you know that we do roster construction conversation. We talk team building, and this is just how we do it. So let's start with the quarterback position where there was absolutely no surprises. The Bills are keeping two quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Case Keenum. Matt Barkley was cut. And I think we all understand that Matt Barkley will be very quickly signed back to the practice squad. And I don't think the Bills will have any concerns about getting him back on the practice squad. First of all, he's a veteran. He doesn't have to clear waivers. So the Bills can sign him immediately back to the practice squad. The only fear that you would have is that some team would sign them to their active roster. Nobody's doing that. Nobody's doing that. Matt Barkley will be back on the practice squad and filling that important role for this team, kind of that peer on the field for Josh Allen, a big part of the game planning and install for the quarterback room. And I think it's always important to remind folks that while Josh Allen's the starting quarterback, the entire quarterback room is important for Josh Allen's performance on Sunday. And so you need to have a guy that can step in and play. But probably more important than that is making sure that the room that you have assembled, from the OC to the quarterback's coach to the rostered players to the practice squad, that those people are all working together to help maximize Josh Allen's performance on Sundays. And this is a good group to do that. It was interesting that the New York Giants released Davis Webb after a really good preseason. They didn't roster three quarterbacks. They're keeping Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor. And so Davis Webb is out there, and I'm interested in seeing if there's any traction from the Bills side of things, because I know they love Davis Webb. I know they would have loved to have Davis Webb back in the Matt Barkley role this year, if not on the coaching staff. And so I just wonder there. So, look, I'm not predicting anything, but would I be surprised if there's some type of interest and opportunity for Davis Webb with the Buffalo Bills? I think it's a possibility. Let's look at the running back position, and I do lump in Reggie Gilliam to the running back position because I think he's truly a fullback, so we'll count him as a running back. The Bills wound up keeping 5 running backs, Reggie Gilliam, the fullback, and then Devin Singletary, James Cook, Zach Moss, Tywan Jones. They cut Raheem Blackshear and Duke Johnson. I'm sure that one of Blackshear or Johnson, if not both, will be back on the Bills practice squad. So you really like the depth here that the Bills have at running back. And what I enjoy most about the construction of the Buffalo Bills running back room right now is that I feel like you finally have complementary skill sets. You have different backs that do different things. Obviously, Reggie Gilliam, he's his own deal, right? Fullback, H-back, special teams extraordinaire. He does a lot for your football team. But from the running back room, you have Devin Singletary, who's your lead back. I'm not going to call him the bell cow or anything like that, but he's the lead back for this offense. And then you have behind him a guy with speed and pass catching ability and outside running ability in a James Cook. And then you have a guy in Zach Moss that's your 220-pound downhill short yardage specialist that helps you in pass protection as well. I love that from a running back perspective, how those skill sets complement each other. What I don't love here is that outside of Tywan Jones, you really don't have any players that help you on special teams. I know Gilliam helps you, Tywan Jones helps you, but if you're going to roster Singletary, Cook, and Moss all on game day, or you're going to dress them all on game day, it's kind of weird that you don't have at least one guy there that can contribute on special teams. And that's where I have some level of speculation about who is going to actually be active on game days. Are they going to dress all three of them knowing that they don't help on teams? So that's kind of an interesting caveat there, but I like the complementary skill sets overall. Like what Tywan Jones brings as a veteran, as a special teams ace, Reggie Gilliam as a do-everything fullback. There's a lot to like about this room. At wide receiver, the Bills are initially keeping 7 players. I don't think that'll be the case for long. Right now, you have Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, Khalil Shakir, Jamison Crowder, Jake Kumaro, and Marquez Stevenson. The Bills cut Tanner Gentry, Neil Bau, and Isaiah Hodgins. I know that Hodgins was a tough cut, and it certainly did a lot to earn his role. 16 catches this preseason. From a receiver standpoint, he really checked the box. The problem is if you're going to be the wide receiver 6 or the wide receiver 5, you have to play special teams. And Hodgins just doesn't have that type of skill set. He just doesn't project well to special teams. It comes down to functional strength, ability to play through contact, ability to make tackles in space, ability to block in space. Those aren't Isaiah Hodgins' top traits, right? Those are things that are not natural for him. And I know that he got a lot of opportunity to play teams, and obviously the Bills, as in the team, they didn't love what they saw, and they chose to move on, at least temporarily. Perhaps if he clears waivers, then you get him back on the team, I'm sure. I'm sure the Bills will put him on the practice squad right away if he clears waivers, but I just have a feeling that Brian Dable and Joe Shane there with the Giants are going to love to snatch up Isaiah Hodgins. And good for Isaiah Hodgins. Good for you, dude. Like, go sign for that team and earn a job. I think that'd be great for him. The Bills have done a phenomenal job of assembling receiver talent. The Bills are going to be just fine without Isaiah Hodgins. Now, selfishly, we'd love for him to become a thing for the Bills, but what's the path here? You've got Diggs, you've got Davis, you have McKenzie, you have Shakir. What's the path for him to actually become a meaningful receiver for this team? It's a tough path. It's a cloudy situation. So while we all want Isaiah Hodgins to become a thing for the Bills, there wasn't a path for that. And so let's all root for him to find success with whatever team he lands on, or if not, come on back to Buffalo, keep developing on the practice squad, and if enough guys get injured, that opportunity is going to be there for you. But when Brandon Beane told us, if you're not a starter, they're going to side with the players that help on 3 and 4 phases of special teams, he wasn't lying. He was not lying about that. That's why Jake Kumaro made this initial roster over Isaiah Hodgins, because neither Hodgins or Kumaro is a starting caliber player, but one is a proven special teams contributor in the NFL. One is not. And the one that is the special teams guy made the team. I feel like I just got pretty passionate about that. I feel like there's disappointment out there. That's why I'm expressing myself the way that I am, because I think between Raheem Blackshear and Isaiah Hodgins, a couple of guys that were just big-time fan favorites throughout the preseason, they went out and did everything they could. They really did. But this is the product of having a deep, talented football team that's contending for a Super Bowl. The days of the Bills filling out their 53-man roster with a couple guys that got cut by other teams the day after cuts are due, those aren't here anymore. Those are way behind us. And I think we just have to adapt our expectations and adapt our understanding of how this roster is going to be built. Every single year, there's going to be players just like this. And so I think you can say that Blackshear and Hodgins did everything they could to make the team. They needed injuries to happen for them to get on this roster. It didn't happen. They didn't make it. Now, Marquez Stevens that did make it at wide receiver, I think that's going to be very, very temporary. As I stated at the beginning of this podcast, the Bills don't have a punter on the roster right now. That's going to change. And in doing so, they need to create a corresponding move to free up the roster spot. And I think that comes in the form of Marquez Stevenson going on the injured reserve list. And the Bills will be able to bring him back at some point this season if they choose to. But I think that's the very obvious Marquez Stevenson to the injured reserve. You sign a punter, and there's your 53-man roster that you go play the Rams with. Moving on to tight end. Dawson Knox, Quentin Morris, Tommy Sweeney. The Bills kept 3. They cut O.J. Howard. If you've been listening to this podcast, you're not surprised. We've been talking up Quentin Morris for a while, and we've been concerned about O.J. Howard for a while. And we know the team loves Tommy Sweeney. And so I was hopeful that it would come together for O.J. Howard with the Bills. He just didn't, right? The guy's coming off of an Achilles injury. He's had an ACL injury. He's not the guy that was at Alabama athletically. Now, I still think he's a quality blocker, but he can't play teams. He doesn't play teams. And the passing game appeal just isn't there with him. And so you have Dawson Knox, your starter. You have Quentin Morris, who can do the Reggie Gilliam stuff that gives you athleticism in the passing game. That's proven himself as a blocker, as a move piece. You have Tommy Sweeney, who's a player that is respected by the locker room, that is a pretty average to below average player across the board, but he actually has a pedigree of special teams where O.J. Howard doesn't. And the Bills are eating $3 million in cap space to move on from O.J. Howard. I'm sure they tried to trade him, and I'm sure there wasn't any takers out there. So while it may seem like a surprise that O.J. Howard didn't make this team, O.J. Howard didn't do what he needed to do to earn the opportunity to make this team. And part of that was showing that you're healthy and you can be a factor in the passing game. Because otherwise, your redeeming qualities are encapsulated by other players that can help you on special teams. Offensive line, the Bills are keeping 9. Deion Dawkins, Roger Saffold, Mitch Morse, Ryan Bates, David Quessenberry, Spencer Brown, Greg Van Roten, Tommy Doyle, and Bobby Hart. Ike Bucker's on the PUP list. They cut Greg Manns, Alec Anderson, Jacob Capra, Luke Tenuta, a draft pick, and Tanner Owen. Luke Tenuta, the only draft pick that didn't make the initial 53-man roster. I don't think there's much in the way of surprises here. Maybe Greg Manns not making it, but the guy just hasn't been healthy. You have to be healthy and showcase yourself, or else it's not going to matter that you have experience on the interior of the offensive line and you're kind of a good fit for what this team wants to do with the O-line. You got to play. You got to go out there and earn it. And I think the Bills would love to have him back on the practice squad, but I don't think you could justify putting him on this team over Bobby Hart and over Greg Van Roten. And so the Bills have a lot of versatility with their depth. Bobby Hart, a 4-position player. Tommy Doyle, both tackle spots, plus he's played some guard. Greg Van Roten, all 3 interior spots. And you kind of have your David Quessenberry, Spencer Brown situation. And Quessenberry's gotten reps at guard in addition to both tackle spots. And, Spencer Brown, I think it's just a matter of him getting healthy and finding his confidence. So the only somewhat of a surprise would be Greg Manns here. As you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job in the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. LinkedIn has simple tools like screening questions to make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. With the NFL season right around the corner, I can't wait to make my entries over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is my favorite daily fantasy resource. How does it work? You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That includes NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket, and more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. So download the Prize Picks app or go to theprizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. So if you spend $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Just don't forget to use our promo code Locked In at sign up for an initial instant deposit match of up to $100. Let's talk about defense. Not a whole lot of surprises here when it comes to the defensive line. At defensive end, they kept 5 players, the same 5 you'd expect them to. Von Miller, Greg Rousseau, A.J. Epinesa, Boogie Basham, Shaq Lawson, and then cut are Mike Love, Kingsley Jonathan, and Daniel Joseph. At defensive tackle, the 4 players you thought they would roster. Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver, Jordan Phillips, and Tim Settle. They cut C.J. Brewer, Brandon Bryant, and Prince Emili, and then they reached an injury settlement with Eli Ankou. And that's good because it allows the Bills to bring him back at some point if they want to. If you just put him on IR, he's out for the season with your team. And so that's a nice little move that they made to preserve that opportunity to bring him back at any point if they so desire once he's healthy. The Bills kept 6 linebackers. I don't think there's any surprises here. Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Tyrell Dotson, Tyler Matakevich, and Balin Spector. They cut Joe Giles Harris, and of course, Andre Smith goes to the suspended list for the first 6 weeks of the season. On the podcast yesterday or Monday, I can't remember which day it was, I talked about the possibility of Balin Spector not making the initial 53 because I thought there was a path to him going to the practice squad, and that's kind of where you can maybe keep an Isaiah Hodgins, but the Bills felt differently. They wanted to make sure Balin Spector made this team, and he did. The Bills kept 6 cornerbacks, and this is where we'll talk about Tre'Davious White, who the Bills put on the PUP list. So he's on the PUP list. They cut Jamarcus Ingram and Jordan Miller, and then Dane Jackson, Christian Benford, Kyer Elam, Taron Johnson, Saron Neal, Cam Lewis. Good for Cam Lewis. All make the initial roster. I think it's important that with Tre White being out initially, that you did keep the 6 corners, right? You want to make sure you have plenty of depth there, and I think that's what the Bills did in keeping Cam Lewis on this roster, who's now played outside corner, inside corner, and of course safety. So there's a lot of versatility and special teams appeal there. So good for him making this roster. But let's talk about Tre'Davious White. They put him on the PUP list, the active PUP list. So there's implications here. He's out for the first 4 weeks, and he can't practice for the first 4 weeks. That's an important piece of this conversation. He can't practice until after week 4. I would not be surprised if we don't see Tre'Davious White until week 8. Because the Bills, he can't play the first 4 games. That's done. Then you have Pittsburgh and Kansas City. Then you have a bye week. Then you come out of that bye and you face Green Bay in week 8. To me, I think that's when you see Tre White this year. The guy hasn't practiced. I think it's that simple. You have to get in game shape and you have to be ready to play. And while he's working on getting his knee right, there's a difference between that and actually playing in an NFL football game. You got to be prepared. You got to be ready from a physical perspective. He's got to trust that knee, and he's got to get in game shape. And I don't think that it's as simple as he's out 4 weeks, practices in week 5, and then we see him against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't think that's going to happen. And then do you really want to make his debut against Kansas City? And let's face it, Kansas City don't have Tyreek Hill anymore, right? They've got some good receivers, but they don't have Tyreek Hill. The Bills don't rush anyone back from injury. And so I was unsurprised that he's on the PUP list, but I think we need to be prepared to take this a step further and acknowledge that he's probably not back until the Green Bay game in Week 8. And I think if you're going to do right by Tre White, your goal isn't to get Tre White back as quickly as possible, right? Your goal is to get Tre White back as quickly as possible and make sure that he's good to go for the rest of the year. I mean, that's going to be a fun moment when the Bills get Tre White back. Like, talk about a midseason move that's going to make your football team a lot better. But the last thing you want to do is rush him back, and the Bills aren't going to do that. I'm convinced they won't do that. And so I would be prepared to not see Tre White until Week 8. That's my expectation at this point. At safety, they kept 4. No surprises here. Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Jaquan Johnson, and Damar Hamlin. They cut Nick McLeod and Josh Thomas. It does feel like Nick McLeod and Cam Lewis were competing for one spot, and Cam Lewis won. And so good for him, but Nick McLeod, certainly a player I'm sure the Bills would love to have back on the practice squad. And then at this point in time, there's 2 specialists, Tyler Bass and Reed Ferguson, and then they're going to sign a punter. And again, my expectation is that they sign a punter, Brett Kern, Jordan Berry, whatever, Sam Martin, Drew Chrisman. There's options. The good thing for the Bills right now, a punter, is they got plenty of options. And it's got to be a pretty attractive situation, right? Like, you can go, if you have your choice, if you're a punter and you have multiple opportunities, go play for the team that can potentially win you a Super Bowl this year. Go be part of that. Now, maybe the downside is that you don't get to punt that much, but who cares? Go be a good holder, get some meaningful punts in when you're needed, go compete. I think that'd be a pretty attractive opportunity. Now, it's Western New York, right? So if you're some young hotshot punter and you want to prove yourself, like, maybe Western New York's not going to be the greatest place to go punt, but if you're Sam Martin, if you're Brett Kern, you're Jordan Berry, you've been punting your whole career, I mean, go get it. Go chase it, especially if you're Brett Kern. So that's the initial 53-man roster and my thoughts on how things are shaking out at this point. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's Marquez Stevenson to IR, the Bills sign a punter, and this is your 53 you go play the Rams with. That's kind of my expectation at this point. If you're living paycheck to paycheck or struggling to make ends meet, it can be really stressful when unexpected expenses come up. Now, Dave can help you get out of a pinch when you really need it. Dave is the banking app that can get you up to $500 with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest or credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Go to Dave on the App Store, right? Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve. Member FDIC. Future you will thank you. So what's next? Well, as I've said 100 times, the Bills got to sign a punter, and they have to have a corresponding move, which I expect to be Marquez Stevenson to injured reserve. But on top of that, filling out the practice squad is going to be a big part of what's going to happen here in the next day or so. And so let's talk quickly about what that entails. The Bills can have 16 players on the practice squad, and of those 16 players, 10 have to be first or second year players. And then you can have 6 with any level of tenure in the NFL. Of course, they have to agree to sign to your practice squad, but seems like a pretty decent gig. So again, 10 first or second year players, 6 that can be longer tenured guys. Doesn't matter. Any player. How does the pay work? I know that this is always something that people are interested in. What do guys get paid on the practice squad? Well, the 10 players or any player that has 2 or less accrued seasons of experience they make $11,500 a week. If you're a player that has more than 2 accrued seasons, you can negotiate weekly pay, and the range is between $15,400 and $19,900. So that's what happens if you're on the practice squad. And then, of course, players can get called up each week. There's the protected practice squad guys where other teams cannot sign them to their active roster, but that can't happen until after your initial practice squad is set. Now, we talk about waivers, and so players that are not vested veterans, they're subject to waivers. Guys like Matt Barkley, there's no waivers for them to be mindful of. They don't have to go through the waiver process. But for the other players like Isaiah Hodgins and some of the other players the Bills cut, Luke Tenuta, whatever, insert young player, they do have to clear waivers. And what does that mean? Well, let me explain it like this. The Bills are currently 25th in the waiver for claims to the active roster. 25th on the pecking order. So let's use Luke Tenuta, for example, or Isaiah Hodgins, whatever. Isaiah Hodgins, that's more where I think people are concerned. Isaiah Hodgins, every team, all 32 teams have the opportunity to put in a claim for him. And it's based on the draft order from the 2023 NFL draft, not considering trades. So whatever original pick you had in the first round. And from there, each team has the opportunity to make a claim. So if the Giants have the 4th pick or something like that, they're 5th on the waiver wire. If none of the teams 1, 2, 3, or 4 claim him and the Giants do at 5, they get him. That's how it works. If the Giants at 5 claim him and the Eagles at 16 claim him, well, he goes to the Giants because they're higher up. And it's not a rolling situation. You maintain that spot. So if you have the number 1 spot, which would be the Jacksonville Jaguars, you can literally claim any player that you want uncontested. If you're the number 2 team, which would be my mind is escaping me right. Who had the number 2 pick in the draft last year? It was it's the Lions. So if you're the Lions, you can claim any player that the Jaguars also don't claim, and you just keep going down the list there. So the Bills are 25th. If they want to claim a player, the 24 teams ahead of them also can't claim them. If they claim a player and nobody else in front of them does, you get him, but then he has to go to your active roster. So keep that in mind. If you claim a player, you have to put them on your active roster, not the practice squad. Now, if within 24 hours or whatever it is, they clear waivers, then they become free agents, and you can sign them back to your practice squad. I don't think the Bills are going to claim any players. I don't think the Bills are going to be interested in claiming players that other team cut. And if they're interested in claiming them at 25, surely one of the 24 teams ahead of them would also want them, right? Wouldn't that make sense? So I don't really expect any activity there. The activity I expect would be Bills players getting claimed by other teams. So what's next is fill the practice squad, let the waiver wire situation kind of play out, sign a punter, do your corresponding move, and get ready to go play the Los Angeles Rams to start the 2022 NFL season. Be right. It's close, real close. We're almost there. As far as this podcast, what's next? Well, later this week, we're going to have an interview with a guest, get another voice on here to talk about some of these hot button issues regarding the Bills. And then tomorrow's going to be fun. I think I'm going to do a little bit of conversation on some of these young quarterbacks in the NFL right now. The guys like Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, and talk about them. Let's have a good conversation about these young dynamic quarterbacks in the league right now. So come on back for that. And of course, stick with me here for this season. It's going to be a lot of fun. So make sure that you're subscribed. We'd love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tomorrow.